Menachem on Israel. After many years of underground warfare, years of persecution and moral and physical suffering, the rebels against the oppressor stand before you, with a blessing of thanks on their lips and a prayer in their hearts. The blessing is the age-old blessing with which our fathers and our forefathers have always greeted holy days. It was with this blessing that they used to taste any fruit for the first time in the season. Today is truly a holiday, a holy day, and a new fruit is visible before our very eyes. The Hebrew revolt of 1944-48 has been blessed with success. The first Hebrew revolt since Hasmonean insurrection that has ended in victory. The rule of oppression in our country has been beaten, uprooted. It has crumbled and has been dispersed. The state of Israel has arisen in bloody battle. The highway for the mass return to Zion has been cast up. The foundation has been laid, but only the foundation, for true independence. One phase of the battle for freedom, for the return of the whole people of Israel to its homeland, for the restoration of the whole land of Israel to its God-covenanted owners, has ended, but only one phase. The state of Israel has arisen, and it has arisen only thus, through blood, through fire, with an outstretched hand and a mighty arm, with sufferings and with sacrifices. It could not have been otherwise, and yet, even before a state is able to set up its normal national institutions, it is compelled to fight, or to continue to fight, satanic enemies and bloodthirsty mercenaries, on land, in the air, and on the sea. In these circumstances, the warning sounded by the philosopher-president, Thomas Masaryk, to the Czechoslovak nation, when it attained its freedom, after 300 years of slavery, has a special significance for us. In 1918, when Masaryk stepped out onto Wilson railway station in Prague, he warned his cheering countrymen, "It is difficult to set up a state. It is even more difficult to keep it going." In truth, it has been difficult for us to set up our state. Tens of generations and millions of wanderers, from one land of massacre to another, were needed. It was necessary that there be exile, burning at the stake, and torture in the dungeons. We had to suffer agonizing disillusionments. We needed the warnings, though they often went unheeded, of prophets and of seers. We needed the sweat and toil of generations of pioneers and builders. We had to have an uprising of rebels to crush the enemy. We had to have the gallows, the banishment beyond seas, the prisons, and the cages in deserts. All this was necessary that we might reach the present state where 600,000 Jews are in the homeland, where the direct rule of oppression has been driven out, and Hebrew independence declared in part at least, of the country, the whole of which is ours. It has been difficult to create our state, but it will be still more difficult to keep it going. We are surrounded by enemies who long for our destruction, and that same oppressor, who has been defeated by us directly, is trying indirectly to make us surrender with the aid of mercenaries from the south, the north, and the east. Our one-day-old state is set up in the midst of the flames of battle, and the first pillar of our state must therefore be victory, total victory, in the war which is raging all over the country. For this victory, without which we shall have neither freedom nor life, we need arms, weapons of all sorts, in order to strike the enemies, in order to disperse the invaders, in order to free the entire length and breadth of the country from its would-be destroyers. But in addition to these arms, each and every one of us has a need of another weapon, a spiritual weapon, the weapon of unflinching endurance in the face of attacks from the air, in face of grievous casualties, in face of local disasters and temporary defeats, unflinching resistance to threat and cajolery. If within coming days and weeks we can put on this whole armor of an undying nation in resurrection, we shall in the meantime receive the blessed arms with which to drive off the enemy and bring freedom and peace to our nation and country. But even after emerging victorious from this campaign, and victorious we shall be, we shall still have to exert superhuman efforts in order to remain independent, in order to free our country. First of all, it will be necessary to increase and strengthen the fighting arm of Israel. without which there can be no freedom and no survival for our homeland. We shall need a wise foreign policy in order to free our country and maintain our state. We must turn our Declaration of Independence into reality, and we must grasp this fact that so long as even one British or any other foreign soldier treads the soil of our country, our sovereign independence remains nothing but an aspiration for whose fulfillment we must be ready to fight, not only on the battlefront, but also in the international arena. Secondly, we must establish and maintain the principle of reciprocity in our relations with the nations of the world. There must be no self-denigration. There must be no surrender and no favoritism. There must be reciprocity. Enmity for enmity. Aid for aid. Friendship must be repaid with friendship. We must foster friendship and understanding between us and every nation, great or small, strong or weak, near or far, which recognizes our independence, which aids our national regeneration, and which is interested, even as we are, in international justice and peace among nations. Of no less importance is our internal policy. The first pillar of this policy is the return to Zion. Ships. For heaven's sake, let us have ships. Let us not be poisoned with inertia. Let us not talk empty words about absorptive capacity. Let us not make restrictions for the sake of so-called order. Quickly, quickly, our nation has no time. Bring in hundreds of thousands. We are now in the midst of a war for survival, and our tomorrow and theirs depend on the quickest concentration of our nation's exiles. And within our homeland, justice must be the supreme ruler, the ruler over all rulers. There must be no tyranny. The ministers and officials must be the servants of the nation and not their masters. There must be no exploitation. There must be no man within our country, be he citizen or foreigner, compelled to go hungry, to want for a roof over his head, or to lack elementary education. Remember, ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. This supreme rule must continuously light our way in our relations with the strangers within our gates. Righteousness, righteousness shall thou pursue. Righteousness must be the guiding principle in our relations amongst ourselves. The Irgun Zvi Lumi is leaving the underground inside the boundaries of the Hebrew independent state. We went underground. We arose in the underground under the rule of oppression in order to strike at oppression and to overthrow it. And right well we have struck. Now for the time being, we have Hebrew rule in part of our homeland. And as in this part, there will be Hebrew law, and that is the only rightful law in this country. There is no need for a Hebrew underground. In the state of Israel we shall be soldiers and builders, and we shall respect its government, for it is our government. The state of Israel has arisen, but we must remember that our country is not yet liberated. The battle continues, and you see now that the words of your Irgun fighters were not vain words. It is Hebrew arms which decide the boundaries of the Hebrew state. So it is now in this battle, so it will be in the future. Our God-given country is a unity. The attempt to dissect it is not only a crime, but a blasphemy and an abortion. Whoever does not recognize our natural right to our entire homeland does not recognize our right to any part of it. We shall never forgo this natural right. We shall continue to foster the aspiration of full independence. Citizens of the Hebrew state, soldiers of Israel, we are in the midst of battles. Difficult days lie ahead of us. We cannot buy peace from our enemies with appeasement. There is only one kind of peace that can be brought, the peace of the graveyard, the peace of Treblinka. Be brave of spirit and ready for more trials. We shall withstand them. The Lord of hosts will help us. He will sustain the bravery of the Hebrew youth, the bravery of the Hebrew mothers who, like Hannah, offer their sons on the altar of God. And you, brothers of our fighting family, do you remember how we started? With what we started? You were alone and persecuted, rejected, despised, and numbered with the transgressors. But you fought on with deep faith and did not retreat. You were tortured, but you did not surrender. You were cast into prison, but you did not yield. You were exiled from your country, but your spirit was not crushed. You were driven to the gallows, but went forth with a song. You have written a glorious page in history. You will not recall past grievances. You will ask for no reward. But for the time being, let us think of the battle, for only the outcome of the battle will decide our fate and future. We shall go on our way into battle, soldiers of the Lord of hosts, inspired by the spirit of our ancient heroes, from the conquerors of Canaan to the rebels of Judah. We shall be accompanied by the spirit of those who revived our nation. Zeev Benjamin Herzl, Max Nordau, Joseph Trumpeldor, and the father of the resurrected Hebrew heroism, Zeev Jabotinsky. We shall be accompanied by the spirit of David Raziel, greatest of the Hebrew commanders of our day, and by Dov Gruner, one of the greatest of Hebrew soldiers. We shall be accompanied into battle by the spirit of the heroes of the gallows, the conquerors of death. And we shall be accompanied by the spirit of millions of our martyrs, our ancestors tortured and burned for their faith, our murdered fathers and butchered mothers, our murdered brothers and strangled children. And in this battle we shall break the enemy and bring salvation to our people, tried in the furnace of persecution, thirsting only for freedom, for righteousness, and for justice.